In a stunning royal revelation, Kate Middleton has just exposed Camilla Parker Bowles for allegedly taking possession of Princess Charlotte's inherited jewelry. These precious heirlooms, meant to be cherished by the young princess, now appear at the center of a surprising palace dispute. The incident raises serious questions about family dynamics, trust, and tradition within the British royal family. As the jewels carry deep historical significance, their unexpected disappearance has shocked royal watchers worldwide. What does this mean for Charlotte's legacy, and how will this royal drama unfold behind the palace walls? The truth behind the glittering scandal is finally coming to light. The heirloom disappears. It was all planned. Princess Charlotte, growing into her teenage years, had a sparkling future mapped out, at least when it came to royal tradition. On her 18th birthday, she was set to receive some of the most iconic jewels in royal history. We're talking about the Spencer tiara worn by Princess Diana, Queen Mary's lover's knot, and a rich emerald necklace once loved by Queen Elizabeth II. These weren't just jewels, they were pieces of history, carrying generations of meaning. Every item had been carefully listed, tracked, and reserved for Charlotte's major life moments. Inside palace walls, the inventory of these heirlooms was treated like sacred scripture. Royal aides maintained detailed logs, marking who wore what, when, and why. Behind the scenes, a quiet team was already coordinating Charlotte's future presentation to the world. It was all about legacy. "We're preserving her lineage," one royal staffer reportedly said. But something strange started happening in early 2025. A quiet buzz among insiders grew louder. A few of the pieces were no longer listed under Charlotte's name. Then came the real shock. The jewels didn't vanish into thin air. They were being seen in public again, but not on Charlotte or anyone expected. In fact, royal watchers spotted them on someone no one anticipated. Whispers turned into confusion. Who had moved the items? And why? Inside royal archives, it became clear. Some of Charlotte's heirlooms were being reassigned. Not stolen, not damaged, but quietly redirected. Someone had changed the official designations in palace records. One royal aide later described it as a silent reshuffling, no announcement, just disappearance. These weren't ordinary accessories. They were symbols of who she was and what she would become. And now, they were gone. "She was supposed to carry the memory forward," said one royal historian. "Instead, she's being left with empty promises." As staff tried to make sense of it all, one name kept surfacing again and again: Queen Camilla. And as her influence grew inside the palace, what she did next sent shockwaves through the family and pushed the quiet scandal into a full-blown mystery. Camilla's unexpected move. When King Charles took the throne, Camilla didn't just become queen consort, she gained new power. Among her roles was overseeing the royal jewelry collection. What few expected was how she'd use it. Quietly, and without public notice, Camilla began assigning pieces that were once marked for Charlotte to someone else entirely. Her granddaughter, Lola Parker Bowles. Now, here's the twist. Lola isn't a royal by blood. No title, no place in the line of succession, just family by marriage. Yet somehow, she started showing up at public events wearing heirlooms never seen before on her. One royal reporter noted, "When that emerald necklace showed up on Lola, jaws dropped. People started doing the math. That necklace was believed to be Charlotte's. For many inside the palace, this wasn't just about jewelry. It smelled like favoritism. Camilla had bypassed tradition, and it didn't go unnoticed. It was as if the system was being rewritten right under our noses, one insider said. Some described it as bold. Others called it betrayal. Either way, something wasn't right. And the most shocking part? These reassignments weren't discussed openly. There were no family meetings, no official memos. The only trace of the change was in internal inventory logs. No statements, no announcements, just actions. By the time anyone outside the palace noticed, the damage was done. Charlotte's future heirlooms were already on someone else's neck, wrist, and head. "This isn't just about diamonds," one royal aide whispered. "It's about what they represent. Legacy, memory, bloodline." As whispers turned into tension, one question began to rise inside palace walls. When does personal preference cross the line into rewriting royal tradition? And soon, it became clear that this wasn't just a fashion choice. It was a battle between old rules and new privilege. Tradition versus privilege. Royal heirlooms aren't just pretty things. They're history in gold and gemstone form. Every tiara tells a story. Every necklace holds memories. That's why, for centuries, these treasures were passed down the bloodline, from one royal to the next. But now, that sacred pattern was breaking, and it was breaking in silence. Insiders were torn. Some argued that Queen Camilla had every right to share family pieces with her loved ones. Others felt deeply uncomfortable. "There's a reason these pieces are reserved for heirs," one longtime staffer said. "They don't belong to just anyone. They belong to the story of the monarchy." But what made things worse? It was all done quietly, behind closed doors, no votes, no open records. A few brave voices inside the palace started urging formal conversations. They wanted someone, anyone, to speak up. But most stayed quiet. Not because they agreed, but because they feared the fallout. The idea of questioning the Queen's decisions, especially so early in King Charles's reign, felt dangerous. People were afraid of being seen as disloyal, an insider shared. And so, the silence deepened. But at the heart of it all was something deeper. If you could quietly change the heirlooms, what else could be rewritten? That's what worried many long-time observers. The monarchy's strength isn't in crowns and castles, it's in consistency, in tradition. If that starts to wobble, everything does. "This isn't just a matter of jewels, it's a matter of meaning," said a palace historian. "When tradition gets bent for convenience, what's left?" But while most remained silent, one woman noticed the shift and refused to ignore it. Calm, calculated, and fiercely protective, Catherine had seen enough. And she was ready to find out exactly what had gone missing and who was responsible. Catherine notices the shift. Catherine, Princess of Wales, wasn't the type to panic. But when she noticed a familiar tiara missing from the records, she felt it in her gut. Something wasn't right. Calmly, she started checking official documents, working alongside trusted archivists, and even a few of Diana's former aides. What she found made her stop cold. The records had changed, without explanation. One tiara here, a necklace there, all pieces tied to Charlotte's planned inheritance. Gone. Quietly reassigned. At first, she thought it might be a clerical error. "Maybe someone filed things wrong," she said. But the deeper she looked, the clearer it became. This wasn't a mistake. There was a pattern, and it was deliberate. Catherine wasn't just noticing odd changes. She was uncovering something bigger. She kept things quiet. No confrontations, no drama. Just quiet work. With the help of insiders, she compared old files to new ones. What she saw was shocking. Charlotte's name, once linked to historic jewels, had been scrubbed out. The dates all pointed to early 2025, said one palace staffer. That's when the transfers started happening. Catherine didn't panic, but she didn't let it go either. For her, this wasn't about power or control. It was about what Diana left behind, what Charlotte was meant to inherit. These aren't just pieces, Catherine told a close aide. They are her legacy. And with every file she opened, every log she read, her resolve only deepened. This wasn't right, and she was going to make it right, quietly but firmly. She never raised her voice, said one insider, but you could feel the storm building behind her calm. By now, Catherine had the what and the when, but she still needed the how, and most importantly, the why. So she kept digging, gathering facts, and lining up accounts. What came next would leave no doubt. This wasn't an accident. It was a calculated move. Collecting the evidence. Catherine knew she had to be careful. Confronting a sitting queen over heirlooms wasn't something you did lightly, so she did what she always did best. She prepared. She avoided big meetings and stayed out of sight, all while collecting every bit of proof. Receipts, access logs, emails, and first-hand witness accounts. Nothing dramatic, just cold, hard facts. One by one, the pieces came together. The emerald necklace, gone. The Spencer tiara, reassigned. Both moved without notice. Aides confirmed that the changes happened not through a committee, but through personal direction. And all signs pointed back to Queen Camilla's private staff. Everything was signed off quietly, said one royal archivist. No one wanted it traced. She spoke privately with longtime staff, those who had served Diana and still remembered her wishes. They recalled how some pieces had been earmarked specifically for Charlotte. It was Diana's intention, one of them said. And now, they were being used in a completely different way. Catherine documented every change and built a file that left no room for doubt. It was all there, clear, quiet, and deliberate. But even as the evidence grew, she didn't go public. There was no shouting match, no leaked email, just private consultations and quiet moves. It wasn't about shaming anyone. It was about restoring what had been quietly taken. She knew how these things could spiral. One palace aide said, she was working for Charlotte, not the cameras. Legacy isn't about noise. It's about knowing what's right, Catherine reportedly said to a close confidant. By this point, Catherine wasn't alone. Word had reached someone else, someone who knew Diana's wishes better than most. And when Prince William stepped in, the stakes suddenly got higher. Quiet no longer meant powerless. William lends support. Prince William wasn't the type to interfere in family matters unless it was serious. But when Catherine shared what she'd found, he didn't hesitate. He knew exactly what those heirlooms meant, not just as royal artifacts, but as the last remaining pieces of his mother's story. They're not just jewels, he said. They're promises we made to our children. William knew the pain of seeing his mother's legacy twisted or forgotten. So when he saw what was happening with Charlotte's inheritance, he took it personally. Behind closed doors, he lent his full support to Catherine's efforts. He didn't make public statements, but he started making private calls, calling in trusted aides, asking questions, quietly pressuring those who needed to be reminded of tradition. The Wales couple stood together, united and strong. No public drama, just calm resolve. For them, this wasn't about fighting Queen Camilla. It was about ensuring Charlotte wasn't written out of a story she was born into. "It's not about control," William told one advisor. "It's about continuity, about doing what's right." Together, Catherine and William began preparing to bring the matter directly to King Charles. Not with blame, but with evidence. Their case wasn't emotional. It was solid, measured, respectful, but firm. And everyone inside the palace began to notice something serious was happening, something that couldn't be ignored. "You could feel the energy shift," said a longtime royal staffer. "It wasn't loud, but it was powerful." And as their quiet campaign gained ground, the pressure started building inside the palace. Whispers turned into meetings. Tension grew behind locked doors. And the royal family found itself facing a question it hadn't dealt with in years. Who really gets to decide the future? The palace pressure bubble. By mid-2025, things inside the palace were no longer quiet. Behind the smiles and wave-at-the-crowd moments, real tension was rising. Staff had begun alerting King Charles, not with alarms, but with carefully worded memos, subtle warnings, and long silences in briefings. The issue wasn't going away. It was growing, and it had reached the top. Inside Charles's inner circle, opinions split. Camilla's supporters defended her decisions. "She has a right to share her family's history too," one aide argued. Others, though, weren't convinced. They warned that if the public found out, it could damage the royal image, especially the carefully rebuilt unity between William and his father. This could unravel years of progress, a palace source warned. Debates started quietly, but grew tense. Staff asked, who controls the legacy? Is it the Queen Consort's personal decision, or does the bloodline dictate inheritance? There were no clear rules, just expectations, and that made everything more dangerous. Without a clear answer, every move risked turning into a crisis, especially with Catherine and William playing it smart. No leaks, just facts. Inside those walls, fear was spreading. Not fear of jewelry, but fear of what it represented. If one generation could reroute the legacy, what message did that send? This was about the soul of the institution, one senior staffer reportedly said. You change this. You open the floodgates. It's not just about tiaras anymore, a courtier whispered. It's about control. And then, just when things couldn't get more fragile, Catherine made a move. Not loud, not planned. Just one powerful appearance that sent a silent, unmistakable message and changed everything. The symbolic reclamation. It happened at St. James's Palace. A routine event, nothing dramatic on the schedule. But when Catherine stepped out of the car, people froze. Around her neck hung the emerald necklace, Diana's favorite. The very piece rumored to have vanished. And just like that, silence turned into statement. There were no press releases, no hashtags from Kensington Palace. But the image spoke louder than words. Catherine, calm and composed, wore the necklace like armor. It was a quiet but direct message. The heirloom was back where it belonged, and every royal watcher knew it. It was the most elegant reclaiming of power I've ever seen, one photographer later said. The tabloids lit up within hours. Royal bloggers ran side-by-side images. Diana in the necklace, Catherine now wearing it. The message was clear to millions. This was more than fashion. It was history, restored. Even those inside the palace felt the shift. The tone changed overnight, one staffer shared. It was no longer a debate. It was reality. And the best part? Catherine never said a word. She didn't need to. Her move was quiet, deliberate, and devastatingly effective. A single photo became a declaration of legacy. And in that moment, the conversation flipped. From whispers about Camilla's choices to admiration for Catherine's restraint and grace. She said nothing, but she said everything, a royal correspondent wrote. But outside the palace gates, the public wasn't silent. That one photo set off a storm, and suddenly, Charlotte's inheritance wasn't just a royal matter. It was the internet's newest cause. And the hashtags, brutal. Media reaction and public outcry. The internet caught fire. Within hours of the necklace appearance, hashtags like #Justice for Charlotte and #Stand with Kate were trending across the globe. Fans dug up old photos of Diana, placed them next to Charlotte, and made one thing clear. People believed this legacy belonged to Diana's granddaughter, not Camilla's. Social media wasn't kind. Posts exploded, accusing the palace of favoritism, secrecy, even betrayal. The narrative hit hard. A future queen protects a past one's legacy. Suddenly, Charlotte's name was everywhere, not because of what she said, but because of what had almost been taken from her. Commenters flooded timelines with messages like, "Charlotte is the true heir to Diana's memory." Even mainstream media jumped in. Royal correspondents ran timelines of the missing jewels, Camilla's recent decisions, and Catherine's quiet investigation. Headlines turned the whole issue into a tug-of-war between tradition and modern favoritism. Some defended Camilla. She's sharing her family's story. But most sided with Charlotte and her mother. One outlet wrote, "It's not about diamonds, it's about dignity." And then came the global conversation. News shows in America, Australia, even France picked up the story. A royal scandal without a single spoken word. Just one necklace, one mother and one daughter whose future had almost been rewritten until the public stepped in. They tried to erase her inheritance, a royal fan tweeted. But Catherine brought it back. The palace stayed silent, but the damage was done. As the pressure rose, all eyes turned back to Camilla. And behind those royal smiles, her demeanor was starting to crack. Camilla's image takes a hit. For days, Queen Camilla said nothing. Not to the press, not to the public, not even through palace aides. And that silence? It spoke volumes. The more she stayed quiet, the more the world filled in the blanks. Was it guilt? Was it defiance? Or something deeper? Regret? As the pressure mounted, Camilla continued with her royal duties. She smiled for cameras, shook hands at engagements, attended ribbon cuttings, but observers noticed something was different. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, one royal correspondent said. She looked distracted, almost burdened. Even her body language changed, less relaxed, more reserved. It was clear. The backlash had gotten to her. Inside the palace, Camilla's team tried to hold the line. Some claimed the jewelry moves were harmless. It was personal, not political, one aide said, but few bought it. Even inside her circle, quiet concern grew. Not everyone agreed with how things had been handled, and behind closed doors, Camilla reportedly began to question her own decisions. "She never expected this reaction," said a family friend. "She thought it would go unnoticed." For a woman who had fought hard to be accepted into royal life, this hit was personal. Camilla had worked for years to gain the public's trust. But now, she faced a cold truth. People still saw her as an outsider. And the jewelry scandal, whether intended or not, had reopened old wounds. "She's not hated," said one commentator, "but she's definitely hurt." And just when it seemed the royal house might split down the middle, King Charles stepped in. Quietly, firmly, and with a message for both women: this ends now. Charles' ways. King Charles had watched the storm unfold from a careful distance. But even he couldn't ignore the rising tension forever. Behind palace doors, he requested private meetings, first with Camilla, then with Catherine. No cameras, no press, just 3 people, 1 crown, and a complicated family truth. With Camilla, the conversation was gentle but direct. Charles acknowledged her pain. He knew how long she'd waited to be accepted, how hard she'd worked to build her role. But he also couldn't ignore what had happened. "We must think not only of ourselves," he told her, "but of what we leave behind." It wasn't a rebuke. It was a reminder. When he met with Catherine, the tone shifted. He thanked her, not just for protecting Charlotte, but for how she did it, discreetly, respectfully, without turning the issue into a circus. "You showed restraint," he reportedly told her. "That's real strength." He asked to see the evidence, and when he did, the conclusion was clear. The records needed to be corrected. Charles ordered the heirlooms restored to Charlotte's name in official palace archives. He didn't erase Camilla's decisions, but he rebalanced them. "Legacy," he said, "isn't about possession. It's about protection." And with that, the message was sent. Charlotte's inheritance would not be touched again. In the end, one palace insider said, Charles chose legacy over loyalty. And as the dust settled, something unexpected happened. While Camilla stepped back, Catherine stepped forward. Not with force, but with quiet power. And a new role no one had officially given her, but everyone now recognized.